USA Warrior Stories is a not-for-profit organization designed to record, archive, and share videos of veteran stories, to help veterans make a connection with one another and to help us all better understand their sacrifices for our freedoms.
For me, even long before the Vietnam War began, there was never a question that I would join the military as part of my paying our country back. So as I looked at it, I said, well, let me go to college, get my degree, because I was, obviously signed up at age 18, drafting a lot of people. So I go to college 64 to 68, but I make a decision. I'm not going to wait to get drafted. I am going to enlist in the United States Army and join the Officers Candidate School program as a college graduate. So I ended up going to the Officers Candidate School, Fort Benning, Georgia, graduated there in '69. But my assignment, as I mentioned, was 6 months Korea. That was warm-up practice in the winter, and then go to Vietnam. But they were so short of officers, 68, 69, the Tet Offensive and all those other things happening in Vietnam. As the first lieutenant, I was directed to stay for my full 13 months on the DMZ of Korea, in the DMZ of Korea. And everybody has to remember, you are literally feet away from the North Korean Army. There's a demilitarized zone and a demarcation of the middle of the DMZ, which says do not cross, all these signs. There are some mines on the North Korean side. But all of us went to that wire. We probably really shouldn't have, because we wanted to be part of history too, in the sense of the axe murder and some live fire incidents and defections. There's always been North Koreans that have defected across the DMZ. I was very near Panmunjom, so it was kind of a focal point for the propaganda and everything else because of that. It was a reminder that yes, the quote-unquote active hostilities are over, but the hostileness is not. Which as a commander, I'm able to use very effectively and say, hey guys, this isn't going to happen on our watch. None of your parents want to hear that your lieutenant lets you sleep or anything else. There are 3 functions in the DMZ. One is guard post. We're actually on the edge, the southern edge of the DMZ, watching. Another one are patrols. And then another one are special missions. And so a special mission was to clear out of the overgrowth. The only year and a half that they sprayed Agent Orange on the DMZ in Korea, who was there? Me. So I have neuropathy. I'm 100% disabled now. Well, almost 99. They're still working on one thing. Bad neuropathy and other stuff. But it's all treated by medical, and so I can do everything except I walk funny. So as I was reassigned after Korea, I was sent back to my same battalion of basic training as a company commander. That was a tough time. I spent a third of my guys were AWOL in New York City area. It's tremendous because the country had turned against the war so badly, 70 to 72. And I had, but I'd still like the Army, and I had planned to stay in. I hadn't gotten my next assignment yet, but with one child born and one on the way, my wife and I decided to go to graduate school at Florida State. So we went to grad school. And sure enough, halfway through my PhD, which I completed all but dissertation, talk about not fun, never did write the dissertation, got too busy, too many kids. What matters is I have a basis that my family set that I could do, and that my drive and the support of Jeannie, that I could establish an education and a philosophy and a dream that I was able to live for 47 more years. And that's pretty rare, especially today when most people work for like 20 companies. Yeah. But I work for one, the United States government, and I've been to 136 countries. Even when I retired, I immediately went on contract because I was then teaching special forces guys that were going overseas, dealing with embassies, dealing with ambassadors, dealing with defense attachés, dealing with CIA people, all these things that I had done. So I think I was the only guy in my generation to spend a year in Iraq after the invasion. So I was in Baghdad, protected by lots of good Army guys. During that time, I didn't realize that at the time, my youngest son, who I haven't mentioned yet, Todd Weaver, he was a senior in high school at 9/11. We were in the States. He came home that day, he said, "Mom, Dad, I don't know how or when, but I have to do something for this country." So sure enough, he finishes high school. He goes to college, but drops out of college to join a National Guard unit, and then they're deployed that January to Iraq. Todd was assigned to the Stryker Brigade up in Mosul, 2nd Infantry Division, same division I had been in Korea, and he was a combat engineer with his National Guard unit, but he was involved in combat a lot. After Todd finished in Iraq, he went back to college, William and Mary, transferred there, graduated Phi Beta Kappa, summa cum laude, and was the commander of the Corps of Cadets for William and Mary and Christopher Newport University, a partnership thing. He had met one summer when he came back for R&R from Iraq. He met one of his high school mates that he really didn't pay attention to. She was in the band and he was captain of the football team. So she was the only one that came out, because all the other high school kids 2 years later were sophomores or juniors in college, all his other friends. So they were too busy with their own lives to come and meet him coming back from Iraq, but she did. A couple years later, they were married in 8 days of May of 2008, graduated Phi Beta Kappa, summa cum laude, commissioned as a 2nd lieutenant in the United States Army, and married to Emma. He actually chooses to go after graduation to the 101st Airborne Air Assault. So he did all the Airborne Air Assault, Ranger. I mean, he did every single training you could do in the next almost 2 years. And then sure enough, when the government in 2009 directed a surge back to Afghanistan.
And as Commander-in-Chief, I have determined that it is in our vital national interest to send an additional 30,000 U.S. troops to Afghanistan.
And Todd's unit was among the thousands that were sent back, and his unit, the 502nd Combat Training Brigade, was assigned to the Taliban's home base, Kandahar province. So Todd is by then the XO. He's one of the most decorated first lieutenants in the 101st, because he's already been in combat and enlisted, all that other stuff. So, but he one day the colonel comes in and said, "Look, guys, we've got an artillery battalion that's fighting in a remote area, not a remote area, but a challenging area in Kandahar, in a village area, and they lost 7 guys in 1 week. They were an artillery unit doing an infantry fight." So the colonel asked, "Would any of you infantry lieutenants volunteer to go over there and take a platoon?" Todd's hand shot up. So he went over in June, and got the guy squared away. And there's only one other person after he got there that was killed for the next 9 months, because he helped them to change tactics and how you do things. So Todd was actually killed about 3 o'clock in the morning on the 9th of September 2010 by walking across on foot, an IED that dogs didn't detect, that he had on the patrol, nor the minesweeper, because the Iranians were putting in plastic new stuff that later on they detected. But that, because he had made such a good impact, the commanders immediately said, "Okay, let's change things." They moved out the villagers. They destroyed the place, destroying 500 IEDs. And in August of that year, when the unit returns to Fort Campbell, Jeannie and I go there. And of course, we're honored with the Gold Star family monument that's there for the 101st, 502nd. Todd's name is on there. But we get to talk to these guys that served with Todd, including one RTO, telegraph operator, telephone operator, who basically said, when Todd was killed, He had decided to go over at the request of the platoon sergeant to check a machine gun position for the ambush. We'd been all over that ground before, but we said, okay, we're all safe now, let's stay put. And then let's get the attack ready. But Todd said, he started walking over, he said, no, you stay here. Putting his safety of his soldier, you know, it's not that far away. He doesn't not going to need a radio probably in that short period of time. So that soldier today, to this day, believes Todd saved his life. 4 days before, we learned from another soldier that they were in that same area, sort of scouting out things, getting ready to come up with an operational plan, an ambush scenario, and he heard a click, another soldier, as he was walking behind Todd. Todd, he said, LT, LT, and he was in a panic, but he was trained, stay put, keep that leg put. Todd went back, put him in his arms, and they both dove. That is the kind of leadership and courage that we would have never known about if we hadn't actually talked to those troops. Turned out it was a dud. That was good. So both soldiers were fine. Sure. But you don't know that. And that's the kind of thing that measured. A final story about how Todd died. He was perhaps clinging to life. I don't think so, because it was, you know, on foot, a 155 round IED, you know, pretty bad situation. But the Army couldn't come in with the helicopter. So they contacted Air Force parajumpers, pararescue. They came in, got him, took him out, you know, to the field hospital at the Air Force Base, and then finally to Dover. But about 6 years ago, the then lieutenant in the pararescue contacted us because Todd has a website. He remembered the name, and through the website, he could contact us. So he reached out, told his story about holding Todd and hoping against hope he could survive, revive. Not so. So the story of Todd and what has proceeded, we as a family, there's no way to prepare for that. In fact, the last thing, I drove out to Fort Campbell 2 days before Todd deployed to Afghanistan with Glenn, his brother. And the last thing I told him as an infantry officer, I said, okay, Todd, because he had known that 7 guys had gotten killed, if any of your guys should fall, remember, you need to contact the parents and stay in touch with them, because you're the only one that's going to know the details of how, not just how that instant happened, if they're killed, but how they served, who they are, and how they supported their buddy. You know, these kind of things. Mm-hmm. And the parents will appreciate that. I never thought that it would be me that was the parents he could not contact. You know, I don't need to hear, I'm sorry for your loss. I want to hear, I'll always remember Todd. Because as the Greek said, a soldier never dies unless he is forgotten. And that's what we're trying to do with Todd. Let's not forget. Our daughter, one of our daughters came up with a scholarship. He now has an endowed scholarship. Every year, 3 William and Mary students travel abroad with a Todd scholarship. We raised the same thing in his high school. So a senior going on to college gets a scholarship with funds. But then one of my daughters was a botany major, and she worked with the veterans of William and Mary to plant a tree that's now huge. And there's always boots, you know, 2 empty boots and flags and challenge coins and other things, painted rocks. What Jeannie did was an amazing thing. She actually decided to do a series of paintings, 21 paintings in a year and a half. Baby shoes, high school graduation, travel, army uniform, army boots, that became a wonderful collection. And the College of William and Mary decided, why don't you let us, College of William and Mary, publish a book? It's called Losing Todd, A Mother's Journey. Robert Gates has the essay that starts the book. There are the colonel I talked about, there's psychologists, there's people that never knew Todd, who wrote essays that sort of tie in as each of the paintings is explained all the way through the book.
Beautiful.
It has had 3 or 4 different printings. It's done only by the college, nothing to do with us. And it just, again, another way to extend the legacy. Over 35 times, those paintings have been displayed to remind hundreds and hundreds of thousands of Americans at this point about the price of freedom through one person's journey and one person's heroism. It's a good saying that, unlike my generation, when people were spit on and otherwise, they didn't separate the war from the soldier, people now honor veterans. And I hope I've played a small role in that and in helping a lot of veterans along the way.